everybody, Ty here. I apologize for not having this video up yesterday, but my power actually went out. I normally do these on the first day of the month or the last day of the month. Of course, with it being Thanksgiving, I had family over. It's a great time on my part. I hope you guys also had an awesome Thanksgiving as well, just like I'd had. But in any case, though, Georgia Power, second time this week. You guys have knocked out the power at a weird time of day, even though our bills paid, so tighten up. Anyway, enough about my ranting and my personal woes here. Of course, we're talking about the December outlook here. We always do a monthly outlook here on the channel. Usually we go off some of the CPC data here, and sometimes we'll kind of go a little bit off of a tangent as well, depending on what we see with some of the oscillations on weather models here. So an interesting thing to make note of here as we get into this, and it's going to be the monthly temperature outlook and the precipitation outlook here. Now, unfortunately, I didn't save the precipitation outlook from the previous outlook that the CPC issued, which was towards November 21st, but we did save the temperature outlook. And if you notice, and if you watched that video last time as well, notice that there were no below average temperature probabilities over the lower 48 at all. It was all over towards southeastern Alaska. I did mention that we would end up seeing a little bit of a change here because of a couple of oscillations that deal with the lower 48 pretty heavily would come into play here. And with that being a factor as it's been over the last few days, we're already experiencing it now. You can actually see now that the changes occurred where we got the below average temperature probability over here towards the northeastern US in particular. And we'll get into the details as to why that change has occurred and why we can continue to expect below average temperatures for about the next week or so over towards the region. Also, notable change here where we've seen an increase in the warmer than average temperature probabilities out towards the west. So definitely has the look of a positive PNA setup over here. Then also a pretty big change is going to be over towards Alaska as well, where before, if you look on the map, you saw the below average temperature probability there. The entire state now is showing an above average temperature probability to go along with it. So pretty big 180 occurred there with this last outlook. Pretty amazing to see how things can change quickly over the course of 9 days. It's not meant to criticize the CPC. I think they do a great job actually, but a couple of changes here with the oscillation can make a huge difference here. But in any case, another big change is going to be the precipitation outlook that we had before. There was a much stronger signal over towards the southeast of below average precipitation probabilities here. And as you notice, we're starting to have an equal chance of either above or below at this point. I think the jet stream underwent some major changes in comparison to some of the earlier model runs that we're seeing. That tends to happen from time to time. Usually we're pretty good, but I always find that winter outlooks and forecasts are always the most difficult to get accurate due to a number of different variables. Too many variables to go over in one video, truthfully. But in any case, though, one thing that has remained the same is, of course, over towards the northwest, where we have that above average precipitation probability there. Most interesting change that I have seen, however, is going to be actually over towards the Gulf Coast, where there now is an above average signal here. It's not a very strong one, so this can still go the other way. We may have a completely different scenario playing out here, but over towards Texas, Louisiana, we will have to watch for the potential for a few storm systems coming into play. This is mainly going to be rain. Don't worry about the threat of snow as of right now. If something does change, we'll have to make another video in the future about that. But another interesting signal here, and this was a little bit more on the neutral side of things, showing equal chances. We've now gone to above average precip, is the Great Lakes over here. And I've been mentioning before with that first cold blast that we had coming in, this was going to increase the lake effect chances. If you ended up watching football over the course of the last couple weeks, you've noticed over towards, let's say, like Cleveland or Buffalo, that lake effect snow's kind of been on the increase, huh? So with that being said, and also the chance of more lake effect snow coming into play, we've now had a switch over to a weak but notable change to above average precipitation over here towards these regions. So if you're looking for snow over here towards these regions, get ready. You're gonna get a fair share of it. We'll just see how extreme or how close to average those values will end up being before all is said and done here. Over towards the northwest as a whole here, big part of that active pattern may have a lot to do with Alaska over here, where a pretty notable signal comes into play for this region in regards to above average precipitation as well. Other than that, this is pretty typical of what we would see with a La Nina setup here. Maybe a little bit drier over here towards the western reaches of the southwest here and the west coast. Sometimes towards these Sierras, we get some pretty active storm. We get a pretty active storm pattern here, but it does look like we have a pretty notable signal of below average precip over here as well. So things could change for the most part, but at least for the first half of this month, a lot of what we're seeing here is going to most likely be the outcome. As we know, things can change pretty quickly though. So we'll leave a little room for adjustability here. That being said, let's go ahead and get into the oscillations here. And this has been a big factor as to why we've seen the changes that we've had here. It's kind of left a lot of people scrambling and scratching their heads here. So basically, there's two oscillations that we pay very close attention to. First one is up here towards the North Pole. This is the Arctic oscillation. And then another one that's very important to watch over the US is, of course, the North Atlantic oscillation as well. Notice that both of these right now are kind of more so into a negative phase, the NAO more so than the AO at this point. The NAO is a big factor as to why we can end up seeing those below average temperatures over towards the northeastern US. Notice that we have a pretty big ridge over towards the northwestern US over here, so definitely has that look of a classic positive PNA. As we go further along here, notice that we kind of level out a little bit. We still have a negative phase that exists over here towards the NAO region, but we've started to switch over to a positive phase, or maybe even I would go as far as to say a neutral phase over the AO region. And as time goes on, we kind of start to lean just a little bit more into the positive AO phase. Now keep in mind, this is looking at things like a week at a time, so this is very much prone to changing, and this is still not telling the story of what every day could be like. But as we can see here, it does look like before the new year ends, we start to switch over once again. So as we get into 2025, there is a chance that we end up seeing another cold blast before all is said and done here. Not to say that we may not see another one beforehand, but it looks like it's going to be a pretty consistent pattern as we get over the next 6 weeks, as we move through the next 6 weeks here. But it looks like for the most part, the western U.S. is going to be warmer than average for sure here. However, there will be some opportunities for some cold air to sneak in, but predominantly I think the worst of the cold air is going to stay over towards the northeast, maybe the eastern half of the U.S. here. Southeast is going to probably warm back up within the next week or so, I would say. As you can see, that pretty warm air mass starting to take shape over here. Depending on how things pan out with this, I do think there may be a small chance or two for severe weather. I think winter weather will probably stay on the lighter side as we get towards the middle to back half of this month as well. So we'll have to see how things pan out with that. But in either case, interesting signals over here that we're looking at. A lot of changes expected to occur as we go further along here. So another way we can get a good look at this is by looking at the jet stream as well. And we'll start to get an idea of what kind of troughs and ridges we could be dealing with before all said and done. Of course, like I said, we're looking into the ridiculous ranges here. We're well past no man's land as we go further along here. This first range over here, not really too much out of the ordinary over here. Still going to be pretty cool off towards the eastern half of the U.S. Out towards the west, we have ridging in play as well. So what we need to be paying attention to is any troughs that develop here. And here's one that we're going to be keeping an eye on. I don't expect too much to come out of this. This isn't going to be a super robust trough at any point. It looks like maybe towards the end of its life cycle, and depending on if we can get some cold air in the mix in, we could get some snow, but it does not look like that's going to end up being the case here. As we go further along, a couple more notable troughs come into play here. Dynamically, I wouldn't be too concerned with severe weather with these as of right now, but of course, still 10 days out in advance is a long way to go. We'll have to just see how this evolves before all said and done. It looks like this is where we start to kind of level out a bit. Cold air is kind of confined more towards the northern states here. Maybe the Great Lakes might get some action on the back end of this trough here, but I do think that the chances right now are pretty minute. does look like we get into a bit of a warming trend over the eastern half of the U.S. as we get towards the 15th and beyond, just like we were talking about when we were looking at the oscillations earlier. So no real surprises to be had there. And it's really this time frame over here towards the 17th and the 18th where I'm kind of curious about the potential for severe weather setups. Obviously, looking at this point, there's no models that are in range at 396 hours. So I'm interested to see what the GFS and the Euro have to offer as we get into range. And that'll be probably a little bit later this week. So we'll be making a follow-up video from that point. But as you can see here, more ridging starts to occur over the southeast here, so we're starting to get like right at average, maybe even above average before we get towards the Christmas holiday time frame here. Eventually a trough does try to come in, but for the most part the southeast ridge is going to come into effect here. So unfortunately, if you're in the southeast looking for a white Christmas, wouldn't expect one. And it looks like as a whole here, the lower 48 as of right now looks like it's going to be above average. Maybe just a little bit after, there's a more notable trough that tries to come in at 636 hours. Like I said, not going to put a whole lot of merit into this, but if this occurs, though, that could make things a bit interesting in regards to potential severe weather setup. Obviously, we're such a long way out. It's just really hearsay that I'm looking at this point. As far as anything beyond that point, just like we mentioned before with the oscillation outlooks that we had, or the oscillation and pressure maps we had, that maybe towards the beginning of next year we could have a pretty notable cool down here. So as far as things are concerned right now for January, it looks like it's going to be a pretty similar outcome. So at this point, it's kind of a toss up, but expect a cold first half of this month. If you're over towards the eastern US, expect things to be pretty warm over here out towards the west, and then expect a little bit of a shift where everybody kind of levels out just in time for the holidays. Of course, we'll still be watching for chances of severe weather, probably lake effect, snow, and maybe even one winter storm, but we'll have to see how things pan out from that point. But outside of that, that's really all I got for you guys. Stay tuned for future videos. Make sure you guys smash that like button, decimate that subscribe button, get that notification bell on, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good rest of your day.